welcome to First United Methodist Church here in Columbus, Indiana. We are glad to have you here with us as we celebrate this Good Friday service. This will be a Tenebrae service, a service of darkness. So you'll see the candles that are lit here in front. One at a time, we will extinguish those after each of the readings. Part of the Tenebrae service is also a remembrance of those final moments of Jesus' life. One of the ways that is exhibited is after the final reading, we will close the Bible with force, a symbol and reminder of the earthquake that took place at that time. The room will move to darkness as a reminder of the darkness that covered the earth. And at that same point, we will remember as well that we are people of hope. So the Tenebrae service ends by the congregation whispering the Lord's Prayer. It is a reminder that even though death comes at that moment, we are a people that knows that Easter is coming. So following the final darkness, we will invite you to whisper with us the Lord's Prayer. Matthew 4:18 through 23. As Jesus walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." Immediately they left their nets and followed him. As they went from there, he saw two brothers, James the son of Zebedee, and his brother John, in front of the boat with their father Zebedee. They were mending their nets, and he called them. Immediately they left their boat and their father and followed him. Jesus built a community of friends. They became family together. From different backgrounds and experiences, he brought them together to recognize that we are all beloved children of God, brothers and sisters together. He taught them how to love, how to forgive, how to care for each other and for all the world. He taught them by his own example, exhibiting a deep love for all those around him. As difficult as it was to imagine, there would be a time when he was no longer with them, but his lessons would remain forever etched in their hearts.
Matthew 14:15 through 21. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowd. And all ate and were filled, and they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. All those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. What are the limits to our caring? We cannot possibly care for everyone. Some must be left aside. The human perspective places limits on our compassion. We only have so much. But Jesus' compassion knew no boundaries. When someone was hungry, he fed them. When they were thirsty, he offered them something to drink. When they were lonely or excluded, he welcomed them. He extended kindness to all whom he met, no exclusions. As difficult as it was to imagine, there would be a time when he was no longer with them, but his lessons would remain forever etched in their hearts.
Luke 18, verses 15 through 17. People were bringing even infants to him that he might touch them. And when the disciples saw it, they sternly ordered them not to do it. But Jesus called for them and said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not stop them. For it is to such as these that the kingdom of God belongs. Truly I tell you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God as a little child will never enter it." Jesus could sometimes be frivolous. There were important people to meet. He needed the backing of all the social, political, and religious leaders if this movement was to succeed. And yet he treated all people with kindness and respect. Children were welcomed into his circle of friends. Sinners found places to eat at the table with him. The poor were treated like royalty. Jesus saw all and welcomed them with open arms. His heart was wide enough to include all the people. As difficult as it was to imagine, there would be a time when he was no longer with them, but his lessons would remain forever etched in their hearts.
John chapter 17, verses 20 and 21. I ask not only on behalf of these, but also on behalf of those who will believe in me through their word, that they may all be one. Like the last conversation with a loved one, we never know at the time that it is the last. But then we look back and realize the significance. These words would stand out for them. It was part of a heartfelt prayer. He prayed that his friends would live together in peace and unity. He wanted them to remember to be kind to one another. He wanted this to continue. He had pointed them to the signs of a community which was still incomplete, a community based upon love and justice for all. They would continue his legacy by making this happen. He loved them all and wanted them to love one another. As difficult as it was to imagine, there would be a time when he was no longer with them, but his lessons would remain forever etched in their hearts.
John 19, 25b through 27. Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. As difficult as it was to imagine, the end was nearing. What would become of the things that he taught? What would become of his legacy? He saw his mother and one of his disciples standing side by side, and he loved them both. He asked them to take care of one another. This was important enough that he asked this with his final breaths. Take care of each other. They needed one another. We all do. He taught us to see one another as a holy family, as brothers and sisters together, care for each other. It was in all that he taught, and it was one of his final requests. The lesson is forever etched in our hearts. Care for the weak, the lonely, the outcast, the sick, the poor, the children, the neighbor down the street, and the person living on the other side of the world. This lesson is forever etched in our hearts, especially in these difficult times. promise of people of hope, let us whisper together that prayer which Jesus taught us, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever.